PhD scholar. He's in the School of English Language at the Foreign Language University in Hyderabad. I've had the privilege of being there. I've had the privilege of being in Hyderabad quite a few times. What an amazing city. So you're currently exploring teachers' intuitive sense of adapting materials in the ESL Indian classrooms. And we are going to be expounding on that research and that thinking. So really looking forward to the session. Thank you so much, Akshay. Over to you. I will be taking questions. Just to remind the audience, please put your questions in the Q&A box. Any chat you can put in the chat box, and we'll pose those questions to Akshay at the end. Thank you very much, Akshay. Over to you.
Yes, I'll just try to share my screen. Please let me know if you'll be able to see and hear me, okay?
Yep, that's sharing well, and we can hear you.
And okay, should we begin?
Please begin. Over to you.
Done. Thank you so very much. Okay, so hi everyone, greetings of the day. So as you're already aware, it's a very interesting opportunity, and I'm already very excited to sort of discuss a lot about teachers and tuitions with this talk. And first of all, thank you to the organizing committee for sort of giving me this opportunity to be able to talk about this topic, which is very close to my heart. So let's try to see what we are doing today. So some of you have already sort of seen the abstract and have gotten some idea what we are trying to do. And I wanted to stick with for a few seconds with the title, and it says definitely more than what catches the eye, exploring and understanding teachers and tuitions, right? So if you actually sort of try to read it, there's a sense of assertion that something that you are seeing, you should and you must sort of try to believe into it. And then what is that you are seeing sometimes or not seeing that you should be believing? That we are trying to say is it's an teachers and tuitions, right? And we are saying that let's try to explore and understand that. So straight away, whatever work I've done till today with my teachers and everything, my experience, I was actually thinking aloud a few days back, and I was just thinking about how very often, even if you are a researcher, a student, a teacher, trainer, a professor, you name it, most of the times we feel so irritated with the fact of seeing a huge gap between theory and praxis, right? Most of the times, even when there are pre-service teachers who are going for training, they always come back and complain that what you taught did not fully work, right? So we are always feeling with these gaps, and sometimes we're trying our best to sort of fill them and thinking about them. So in the reflection, I sort of thought about eventually my understanding about this theory and praxis gap that we see in language teacher education. I feel that it can only become an actuality when one starts feeling it, you know. Because even with this talk, I can supply a lot more theory. We can discuss into different chapters and books and models and theories, but it will begin once we start feeling it, right? And that's when I think we'll start to see some more and more growth and the reduction into the theory and praxis gap. So let's try to establish the base and see what we are trying to do here. So I wanted to begin with giving a small a small sort of historicization of intuition. That what is intuition, where is it coming from? We'll try to go deeper into it, but let's try to talk about since when potentially we've started to talk about intuition. And I'll specifically be sticking to the literature which is either coming from very closely education studies or ELT, because there is a huge lack of literature on intuition in ELT. So I've tried to sort of pick up the best sources possible which are very close to ELT and which can be used, right? So there's a book called The Intuition Practitioner by Guy Clarkson. He beautifully sort of tries to give a insight into the history of intuition, that what it has been through. So this construct everybody, most of the researchers, psychologists, neurologists who have been working around intuition sort of agrees to the fact that apparently it's one of the very few psychological constructs which is so controversial. It lacks so much clarity, and people are just trying to research onto it. And maybe it's been centuries and years and ages we have not been able to sort of untangle it, right? So, but don't worry, there have been some work, and we are trying to sort of get into that. So, if we have to talk about the historicization, most of the education studies people believe that we started to actively talk about it during the 17th century. And there were many philosophers and thinkers who were talking about it. But during the 17th century, most of the people were believing it to be mysterious, it to be a godly figure, it to be a aura of God. That, for example, Spinoza is saying that intuition is something which is mysterious, and you can't really conceive it, and it sometimes appears out of your aura, and it's the truth of your aura, and is calling it God at some point. In the 19th century, we are seeing a lot more emphasis in a little change, but not much, where people like John Stuart Mill are saying that truths known by intuition are original premises from which all others are inferred. So it's a very, again, similar focus on the truth and all. I think one of the reason was also because that during the 17th and the 19th century, there were a lot of occult practices as well. So there was a lot of mysticism attached with intuition. There was a lot of just surrender attached to it. And by the time we reached to the 20th century, we started believing in the power of mind. And which is basically saying that the understanding that got developed of the intuition was that it's a power of mind by which it immediately perceives the truth of things without reasoning or analysis. Then we are reaching towards the late 20th century. Then we see sort of two broader views. One, that it's a supernatural concept that we have been seeing in past years, right? But a second awakened understanding about intuition came up, which is saying that knowledge or opinion presented without a rational pedigree, lacking a tale of justification and agreement. So it sort of is sort of giving much more words, much more keywords to this definition, that it just being mysterious, you know. So then recently we are seeing like Guy Clarkson is sort of defining it to be as an immediate imprehension of action without intervention of reasoning process. Chambers is saying that, and Clarkson is saying that it can be understood as an appearance of informed action or judgment without attention thought. So any action or any thought or judgment which does not really require too much action, or we are just feeling it, can be labeled as intuition. So we'll try to unpack all these things later on as we move ahead. I also wanted to establish some base by historicizing since when are we sort of getting interested into intuition. Intuition is sort of coming into the research of cognition studies and the human mind, right? So when it comes to elt as a discipline, it's not too newer, but neither not too old also to sort of not make any generalizations. So Professor Annie Burns does a wonderful review around cognition in ELT, and there we get to see quite some insights about it. So she's suggesting how during the 1970s, the researches into the human mind in ELT context was not much enough, because there was not much enough for the teachers to think about as well, because they were dealing with monolingual methods era, right? So the teachers were just sort of trying to replicate what was suggested, and there were not much research emphasis as such. Then as we move ahead in the 80s, as we're already aware, I think most of us are aware of the ELT history, how there were behaviorist approaches coming in, leading to the cognitivist approaches, right? And so in the 80s, sort of new innovative methods are also trying to come in, and we are seeing a shift from the audiolingual methods, and finally the teacher gets a little more sort of to think in the classroom, right? And then the cognitivist and the behaviorist are saying, let us try to look at their cognitive capacity. They finally try to sort of trying to realize that the teachers' minds are also worthy of sort of a lot of ELT research, right? And then we are moving ahead towards the 90s. We are seeing that the language teachers are feeling a little more freer, right? Because we were moving towards more innovative methods in terms of task-based or before task-based communicative language teaching, right? So we see that the teachers are getting a lot more freer with a variety of methods to choose. And the cognition is also focusing on teachers as the principal classroom actors. And they are interested into examining what they could contribute to understanding the hidden dimensions. And then we see a social situatedness in the 1990s with the task-based language teaching and post-method conditions arriving in and all. And that's when we actively start talking about teachers' mind to be the decision maker in the classroom, right? That's when, since then, since the 90s, we have been hearing that the teachers knows their classrooms best. So these have been a few developments historically whenever it comes to researching about the teacher's mind, specifically in ELT context, right? And this is only around 90s and post 90s that suddenly there was a huge surge in research, and most of the researchers started to research around teacher's mind and concepts like beliefs, assumptions, different sort of frameworks, personal theory, a lot of discussions on tacit knowledge, pedagogical tact, and a lot more cognitions or cognitive aspects started to came in, right? And we started to actively talk about them. So now, finally, after getting to know some base and placing teachers and tuitions, let's try to dig into what is the theory and praxis perspectives that we have in ELT literature about teachers and tuitions. So there are not many, but whatever they are, I think it's very important to sort of make sense of them as well. So it goes back to 1966. Jerome Bruner is writing about learning in a conference report, and it's one of the celebrated sort of report already. So there he's looking at intuition as a problem solving approach, and he's sort of also suggesting there are different features of intuition and intuitive thinking, which can be confidence, visualizations, that it's a non-verbal sort of uh, approach that happens, and it doesn't really follow a structure, and it sort of follows a partial use of information as well. Then later on in 1966, we are seeing that Baldwin, in another book edited in the same conference report by Bruner, he's saying that intuition is a foundation on which the processes of analysis and formal explanations may rest. And it is the making of good guesses in situations where one has neither an answer or an algorithm to obtaining it. So if you see, Bruner's sort of conception of intuition is also very similar to Baldwin, right? Both of have a very common thing, that there's a problem that sort of occurs, and there's an answer that we are trying to sort of look for, and we don't have a clarity over it, but somewhere we are aware of some of the characteristic features of it as well, right? For example, Baldwin is also saying that hunches comes in uncertain situations. He's also arguing how it has iconic cognitive representations, how he's also relating it to Piaget, when a child sort of have schema formations in their mind and how it cannot be articulated well, right? And about the hunches also, he's explaining that someone has said that intuition is a disciplined guess, and that expression conveys both the freedom and the constraints that must be balanced in creative thinking. Later on, in 82, So 60s to 17, we don't really hear much about intuition again. Then in 82, we see Stevik talking about it, and we see that he's saying that uh, what we see at times, these times will prove nothing. Intuition alone, however convincing, never proves anything. It is the source of guesses that may then be tested by non-intuitive means. So, whereas Brunner and Baldwin are sort of trying to understand it, Stevik seems to have taken a different stand where he says that it's just a mere game of guessing whenever one feel like. And later on, as we move ahead with the theoretical investment into teachers and tuitions, we see Brown taking a lot of interest into it again in 80s. And he's trying to understand intuition by doing researching around cognitive styles. And he's saying that intuition is a less rigorous with respect to proof, more visual and iconic, more oriented to the whole problem than particular to parts. So it is also need to be noted that this was also a time where a lot of Gestalt theory and Gestalt models were also coming in. So that's where he's saying that intuition revolves a certain sense of risk taking. So for him, whether it's an approach, whether it's something, we don't know. But he's saying that it's a certain kind of risk taking. So he's defining it differently. Then later on in 2011, as we move ahead, we see a very good book actually. It's called The Intuitive Practitioner, and where Guy Clarkson, along with many other people, sort of comes together and borrows from the education studies and see and try to understand intuition and writes elaboratively about it. And he says that if we have to simply understand intuition, intuition is just different ways of knowing, or you can say that it's the appearance of informed action or thought without attendant thought. And he's saying that what are those different forms of knowing that can also be understood as different kinds of intuition, which are expertise, learning, sensitivity, creativity, and problem solving and rumination. Then we see Zeri in 2017 taking a lot more interest. So there's a huge gap between 11 to 17, right? And Zeri is also relying on a person called Coach, where who's saying that um, intuition can be think of as an ability to sort of comprehend something without relying on conscious reasoning, right? So we see there is a lot of emphasis on many characteristic features that we saw earlier here in 1960s, right? So these new perspectives are also not only building onto them, but also trying to sort of give a lot more form to them, right? But there still exists a lot of gap even when it comes to theoretical investment. Then you may ask that what about the praxis, right? Let's find out. So those were the theoretical investments. And when it comes to praxis, there also we need some reconsiderations. So one of the few studies on in the ELT context that we've seen is 1980s again, right? 1980s is similar when Brown is talking about it, Stevik is talking about it, Brunner has already started to talk about it in 16s way back. So when it comes to praxis, very interesting sort of studies that we see. For example, Agabar and Trump sort of try to look at authors' intuitive insights about writing with some theories of language learning, and they connect it with writing. They do the study in the US education context at the George Mason University, and they use a tool of discussions, interestingly, and they sort of eventually suggest that uh, they are highlighting their intuitive moments and showing how composition instructors can use this knowledge of writing to make process to make most of composition writing or instruction in their classrooms, right? And then Hartley and Jeffrey in 2002 are trying to explore the benefits and difficulties of undertaking a diary study. And it is in the process where they are teaching in a Japanese university and they're teaching a communicative English course. And upon a lot of discussion, about their diary entries, they're saying that classroom environment, learners, practical aspects of own teaching, all these reflections on diaries does help us to extract out some intuitive moments, and it can be time consuming and dedicate, it requires dedication, but sort of help us a lot. Then in 2007 we see another study by McCosty, which is again working in the Japanese context, and McCosty is trying to compare judgments of what frequency by teaching professionals with those of average native English speakers. And they are using some corpus tests where the study is indicating that the English teaching professionals' judgments do not seem to signify better than university students. Furthermore, both groups of native speakers had difficulty judging this. And so here also they say a 50-50 sort of role of an intuition working in, and the results are indicating that the teachers frequently need to rely on their intuitions as well. Further, in 2008 and 15, we see one more studies where Lakshmi, as a master's student, is trying to reflect on her teaching experience, where she's again reflecting on her diary, and she's realizing how reflecting onto her intuitive moments there is helping her in her reflective practice as well as professional development. Then in 2009 and 10, we are seeing another study which is from the Iranian and the British context. Whereas one study is trying to look at EFL teachers' intuition or concepts. And through questionnaire and Bali, they're suggesting that learners hold different beliefs than teachers, while both agree, but mismatch is the agenda. So basically, in this study, what the researchers are trying to say is that does the teacher intuition and the learner's intuition sort of match? So eventually, he's using David Noonan's hidden learner agenda, where they were trying to do a match, whether they match or not, right? So eventually it comes out that teachers' intuitions are, of course, different from the learner's intuition, and they expect different things from the same curriculum in the class, present in the classroom. Then Wilson in 2010 is sort of reporting on beliefs, attitude, and values. It's also very interesting that how he is operationalizing intuition or trying to do it as a combination of beliefs, attitudes, and values. He's using a questionnaire survey, and he's saying that teacher believe intuition is central to composing poetry, and using different kind of tasks can help teachers not only in their self growth but also to tap into their intuition. Then lastly, it's a last trend that we see. In 2015, Rogers and Mumura are trying to look at, they're trying to compare the corpus data, value of corpus data versus teacher intuition, where they're saying that the teacher intuition based vocabulary sort of possess low frequency when it comes to teaching younger children, but it's more preferable due to it promote being able to promote high imaginability, right? And I mentioned, forgot that Skeffer is also discussing whether teachers is showing that teacher judgments of rule of difficulty sort of helps a lot when it comes to intuition. And the most recent study being done is a master's project by Camilo in Spanish context, where she's trying to say that the strategies that the teachers use intuitively to sort of assist specially able students, it helps a lot in terms of mental stimulation and improve their second language learning, especially in the context of vocabulary learning. So I just wanted you to notice certain trends, even in the praxis aspects, how we started from 84 and then 2002, 7, even the praxis elements related to studies has been a little here and there, right? They are not very continuous, and we cannot really see as if few studies are informing the others. But here comes the breakthrough. In 2023, which is the last year, finally ELT got exclusive full issue on investigating the intuition and practitioner research, where it has two it sort why this whole issue is very important, because a very expert sort of teachers, professors, and trainers have sort of come together, and they are not merely relying on their own learning, but they are doing the job that education studies and linguistics has been doing, but we were not being able to for some reasons. Also because it's not very clear in tuition, right, as a concept. So finally, the professors and these trainers are taking this task and then trying to borrow from education studies, intuition in business studies, intuition in medical studies, and trying to give us very tried and tested frameworks and ways of tapping into intuition. For example, Annie Burns is suggesting how action research can help teachers in general and trainers to sort of realize the value of intuition and into their teaching practices. Pinner and Hank, on the other hand, are talking about exploratory practice, how once we do it in a very organized way, we can tap into our intuitive moments as well. Further, Morris and King are looking at the importance of stimulated recall, how that sort of helps a lot and can be a very good one because it's already established in ELT. And for example, Simon Borg already has suggested one of um, very descriptive sort of steps of how to go about it. Then Sampson and Ushioda, Sampson is talking about intuitive moments using auto ethnographic case study, similarly using diary studies as earlier few authors. Then lastly, Emma is Ushioda is sort of telling us to realize and stay aware of the complexities of revolving around psychology of language learning, especially when we are sort of working around intuition research. Then it's not only adding into the praxis as the earlier studies, but it's also adding and giving us some more clarity over ELT understanding. How do ELT people understand intuition, right? Finally, these are few of the insights that we get with, and we have a lot more once you check this out. It's available online, where we are sort of contesting that intuition per se is the moment of decision, or we can say that it's the feeling that where we are not able to say what we sort of know sometimes. And they are also saying that it can be a process, then it can also be referred to as a spontaneous emergent feelings, or maybe it can be think of as the acts of cognitive processing. The best part about these definitions is that in ELT community, we can rely a lot more onto them, not only because they're coming from the ELT experts, but also they sort of go this sort of go complement actually with the existing cognition research in ELT when we talk about personal theories or perceptions or um, teacher beliefs, so these sort of ways of looking at intuition, that's what I'm trying to say, is very similar to or friendly to us the way we have been looking at tacit knowledge or pedagogical tact or beliefs, personal theories, or intuitive understandings, etc. Right? So that was a lot of literature review in a way, but now we'll try to move towards more fun things, which is the intuition models. So I tried to research a lot, and the issue that I faced was there were not many models, but there were a lot of discussions, but mostly into the business context or the medical context. But even then, I tried my best to sort of dig around and give us models which are best fit for ELT and which have been employed into the education studies already. So the first model, if we have to go about it, for example, if I'll give you a few seconds to look at this picture and I ask you what sort of stands out for you, right? I tried doing it with a few juniors a few days back, and I asked them what stands out for you. And most of the people sort of responded that the man who's sitting in the middle, who's also a Bollywood star, actually Shah Rukh Khan, um, that person sort of stands out for them. And then I asked them to That was a very instant response that they gave. And when I asked them to sort of stay with this picture for a while and then give me their responses, that's when not only they started looking at these other people, but also they started creating a narrative of where they must have seen a similar sort of scene somewhere, right? Or when was the last time they saw water in such capacity? When was the last time they saw similar people or the similar lands and things like that? So our first model is dual process model, which sort of is based on dual process theory, which says that whenever our mind or intuition is working, it always involves two sort of systems which are simultaneously working together. And you may feel that it's an intuitive response that you have gotten, but that may be the case, but that does not mean your system two, which is your analysis, that is shut. So most of the researchers sometimes refer to them as system one and system two, or sometimes they refer to them as intuition or analysis. So it's a very simple one. I didn't want to make these very difficult with jargons and everything, because the whole point of doing this talk is to sort of start talking actively about intuition and start finding about it, right? For example, system one sort of, it's a very automatic, it's again all the characteristics that we've talked about intuition earlier, how it's very spontaneous, it's not very verbal. We can't really see it, we can't really verbalize it well and everything, goes to system one. So whatever features we attach with intuition goes to system one. System two is the rational feature, when we sort of try to reason what we are seeing, right? Sometimes when we see why do we like certain things, but we are aware, right? Your intuition just doesn't speak that you don't like it. And sometimes we say that I don't like their vibe, and you don't have an explanation. That's your system one working. So that's one model. It's called dual process model. So when you are looking at the same picture, so intuitively, if you are just liking the central guy, or you are liking the water, let's say, not even the guy, uh, that is your system one sort of working in this process. Sorry. Then, if you are trying to think a lot more around it, automatically, that's your giving your observation some reason. That's your system two working. Then, if you have to sort of think a lot more about it, it's a very interesting task that Kanhem sort of suggests. Kanhem is known to be one of the founders when it comes to dual process model, and there are many other people like Epstein and Eugene Adler Smith who have also done major contributions. So, when I said that, you looked at it and it gave you one answer, then you thought about it, it gave you more answers. Let's try to break that. So, for example, you can do that whenever you get times, because we have to move forward as well. So, let's say we have these two columns sort of given, and we have to call out these words first in a lowercase or in a uppercase. That's our choice. And then when we are done with this one round, we have to sort of try to go either left or right. Okay. And we don't have to stop. It's very similar to all those vocabulary things, rhyming things that we used to say, and we didn't used to sort of finish, right? So it is also a task, a very classic example from psychology that sort of shakes your system one and system two, because at one go we can read like left, left, right, 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 left, left, right, but I have to go from right to left, or let's go from right to left, upper right, lower left, lower. So I'll stop a lot, because I'll start thinking, my time will start rationalizing things, and will take some time, right? So that is a very good example of how sometimes your system one and two sort of gets confused, and then it also can be altered and trained. So the another model, I was just thinking about how one of the days I was talking to one of my colleague who had just finished a class, and she was like that I went to the class, and just before going to the class I wasn't feeling really well, and then I went into the class, I sent the students mood, and they were neither looking very happy. So that day I decided that It's not that we'll skip the class, but we'll do a very lighter class. And I had to teach them the essay format for the critical writing skills. But then eventually we ended up listening to a Coke Studio song and started observing some elements of the essay into that, right? So here is the second model working, which is also called the recognized prime model, RPT, where in any situation as teachers or trainers or as individuals, we're sort of generating some cues. For example, the more rational you are getting and the more time you are thinking about that picture, right? Or even if this picture, you are generating some cues that already possess in your surroundings, and then you are generating some patterns out of them, and those patterns are resulting giving you a mental schema, and that is helping you to sort of react into that situation, right? For example, the example that I gave of this teacher, this colleague of mine deciding to uh, just change her lesson the moment she entered into the class. It of course didn't just occur in the instant that she decided to use the Coke Studio and everything, right? So she sensed the situation, basically recognized it, and she got a cue after looking at the students that they may don't want to study a lot today, and then uh, with the same situation, some a pattern sort of emerged into her mind, which are also the mental cues, right? And in the form of mental schemas, and that sort of helped her to sort of decide that okay, in this situation, I think it has occurred with me earlier also. It's better to sort of take it a little lightly, the classroom, and that worked out. So that was your second model when it comes to intuition research. So both these models have not been really delved into ALT research at all. So this actually opens up way a lot more newer opportunities for us to think about these models, and then try to look at in our context what is happening, how can we report. So there can be a lot of scope there. Another sort of part of the presentation where small steps towards becoming an intuitive practitioner. So we have talked a lot about the what has gone into the theory and the praxis of intuition. What are the two models? I'm trying to sort of keep things in an overview perspective so that we'll at least start thinking about things and will not get overwhelmed, and it the presentation does not become behavioral science presentation, right? Because it's an ELT conference. So what are the few ways, let's talk about to become an intuitive practitioner, even if you are a teacher or a student, or what can we do actually? So this is basically mostly for the teachers and the teacher trainers, right? So I'm targeting at the teachers that one of the things that can be done is observing our lesson plans. I know there has been already a lot of research being done on how effective lesson plans can be designed or their impact and things like that. But I believe we have never really gone much detail when it comes to reporting research in this specific aspects of lessons, right? For example, if you want to develop the intuition as a teacher, uh, uh, Atkinson 2011 is sort of asking you to do a few things. For example, in this image, in this diagram, it's from the intuitive practitioner. You see that whatever plans that you have prepared, you sort of go with that, but start reading the situations actively once you go to the class, right? And then start realizing what are the conditions that are changing and what are the situations that are developing. Start interacting with the things around you. Start thinking a lot more, start perceiving, then start deriving conclusions out of them. For example, let's say I prepared a lesson that I'll teach using vlogs or something like that, right? And then when I entered into the class, I have to be able to read the situation and make some judgments, right? And then perceive everything, whatever is happening to my best limits, and then conclude and decide whatever learning that I've had after that class. And that can result into unfinished business, because if you'll not really sort of reflect a lot on your classroom experience, like N.S. Prabhu says when he talks about in teacher sense of plausibility, that you can get routinized and your intuitive understanding sort of can get fossilized as well. Then the second aspect with the same lesson plans that we can do is, first one, we are saying that just go with the plan, whatever plan that you have, just go with it, and we are looking at how that plan is react, that plans in your mind is reacting with your classroom operations, right? Then with the second part, the second thing that we can do with the lesson plans is that we can transcribe them. And after transcribing, we can sort of try to analyze the events. For example, in this one, we see the themes of pupils, anticipation, or tactical perspective, or deliberation, right? So these will get you more aware of a teacher role in a more truer sense, that will not merely be 20 to 80% teacher talk or things like that, right? That will actually give you a more evidence on what is working for you and what is not working in your class. The another thing that we can do is very important things, specifically when we have started talking about teacher well-being. We also have one more session in our conference on teacher well-being post pandemic, right? Is the assessment of mood assessment. You don't really need to fill too many questionnaires and go to online questionnaires and test to sort of gauge. Sometimes as a teacher, we have to find these sustainable ways which can make keep us our motivations alive and intuitions alive, right? Can adopt is the mood assessment, where we just sort of are trying to make a table, and we are thinking that what was I thinking in that moment, or before. It can happen during the class, before class, whenever it suits you. And then we are sort of looking at the interactional patterns and what did I do about it. So it's very similar to that. What is my mood? What How I look at it? What is it making me feel, and what action can I sort of take on it, right? This is another thing that can also sort of help you sort of not only develop intuition, we all have it, but sort of improve on it, right? Okay. The fourth activity or the task that I want to suggest is again a very popular psychology sort of task, and I'm deriving it from Adler Smith's book, which is called the traffic light model. The task is called the traffic light model. It's one of my favorite activities, where or task where if I have to sort of find out an answer, whether is it my intuition completely talking, is it my analysis, what am I doing, am I getting too rational, or am I not sort of listening to my hunch. I just have to do a small thing, which is just write intuition analysis and write whatever question that I have. And if I end up writing yes in both, then it's a green light. And if I end up writing no in both, that means that but what if I end up writing yes in intuition and no in analysis? So it will result into an amber light, which will say that do check on your intuition. Ask yourself a lot more questions related to that activity. Then, if I'm writing no to intuition and saying yes to analysis, then it's suggesting me that you check out your analysis and think a lot more about it. Yes, so I'm wrapping it up the last few minutes. Endings for the newer beginnings. So lastly, I wanted to suggest what are the implications basically with this brief discussion that we have tried to have about the theory, the praxis, the models, the some of the tasks. So we are trying to touch them. What can we do about it as we go ahead, right? So for teachers, I'll say that don't kill your emotions in the routines. Try to listen to your voices, whatever whatever you feel on daily basis about your classroom. Try to trust your judgments a lot more. Then record your pauses whenever you feel like begin by recording whatever your experiences are and all. That will give you a greater insight into what you actually feel and what your intuitive sense sort of says, right? Then from the researcher's perspective, one major task that we have is to take a stock, is that what all research has gone into ELT actually, that we can build up on it if we don't feel very comfortable in deriving a lot of frameworks from the other disciplines, right? Second is piloting is the key. Don't be too informed. That's what I'm trying to say, is that try out, even if you're designing a new tool, try to sort of look for it and see how it's working. And hunches are real. Try to listen to them as well sometimes whenever you can. And lastly, for the trainers and the policymakers, for the trainers, I feel the trainers, if they'll start thinking more about intuition, they'll not only start getting more awareness about the external world of them, which is a lot of training and teaching, but also their internal, like as we already saw, a few of the researchers and the trainers have tried that, right? So I think tapping within them will sort of help them a lot more. And then actualizing enabling. So sometimes in teacher training programs, enabling also we have sort of started to take too seriously, eventually following a very prescriptive route of dealing with teachers. So we have to actually actualize the enabling aspects and save your diaries. They can be of very useful. Your journal, your reflective journals, they can be of very useful to sort of give us more insight about what goes into trainers' minds. And lastly, for policymakers, that please don't think that you know always the best. The committees has so many people. Try to hire people from different parts of life, and of course with some expertise and knowledge. These can do wonders, and also record well whenever we are working with teachers, especially in the policy making aspects. We are mostly sort of limiting ourselves to certain reports as such. But if we do a better record of our initiatives and everything, I think we'll get a lot more insights. So that was the session for you guys. The references, I apologize for lacking a bit of the energy. I'm a little tired. I'm so sorry. But I hope this conversation has sort of made you think at least about some things about the intuition. I'll be very happy to sort of hear from you. And if there's any more questions, you can email me at akshayflu@gmail.com. Thank you so very much.
Thank you so much. Actually, you did not come across as tired at all. Really, really interesting. And I don't know, I was a teacher trainer for many, many years and headed a department, and intuition was never really discussed. It was one of these things that was very peripheral, and it's interesting that you're bringing it to the fore. We're very short on time, but we'll quickly answer a couple of questions in the Q&A box that are there. Rabin Aranyan has said about what's the difference when it comes to pre-service teachers and in-service teachers in terms of their intuition, and the actual question, what difference does intuition make in their professional lives? So comparing pre-service and in-service.
Right. That's actually, thank you for the question. That's so, whenever we are discussing about intuition, we are mostly either relating it with decision making, like, or expertise. So the major difference that we see in um, uh, the novice and the expert teachers, we sort of call them the pre-service teachers or the novice teachers. They are still getting into the training. They are still getting more knowledge about the profession. Whereas the in-service, we expect them to have the expert intuition, which is a better, more aware sense of intuition, where we discussed about the prime recognition prime model, right? So the novice ones are more rational with their sense. They need evidence for everything and all. And to put it more simply, the in-service one are more intuitive. Because they have been for years into their service, right? So they are developing these insights about different things. For example, one when you sort of train teachers and you get into the context, and since you have accumulated so much experience, you go to the context and you are instantly able to make some judgments. And even if I cross question you through a thing called puzzling technique, I'm sure we'll have answers for that, right? So that's the major difference, that the novice ones sort of slides on the continuum of the rational side, and the expert ones are on the more intuitive sides. Yeah.
So I guess experience teaches you to trust your intuition, if you like, and then
Yeah,
act on it. Whereas inexperience, you tend to stick to the more rigid kind of, this is what I was going to do.
exactly.
We'll have one more question. I know we're over time, and I'm so sorry if I can't answer all the questions. One other here for you, actually, was a really nice subject. So this is from Yin Mohammed, and was saying that, and I really like this sentence, would you say that intuition is an important part of teaching practice? And I think you've really clarified that it is throughout this, but would you say that reflection could be the analysis and intuition as a kind of reflective tool? So your reflection is your analysis of your intuition, intuition as a reflective tool. Would that be the case in your opinion?
Of course, yes. But actually, what I have realized, it does help a lot in the teaching, but we are always ignoring it.
Yeah.
So with this sort of literary analysis of that, there are some people in academia who have researched around it, have gone into it. Let's not just always suspend it. We are not saying that the intuition, thinking of your intuition will always assure you better results, but it will ensure like surely help you a lot in the teaching. For example, even when we train the pre-service teachers or students, we are always limiting the think aloud activities to be think aloud, assuming that the students will majorly say two, three, four things. That's it.
Yeah.
You know, so, from a micro perspective, from one activity to a larger activity where we are enabling teachers to make much more sense of this world. So, I do believe it can help to that extent. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, actually, thank you so much. Lots of thank yous in the chat box. A warm thank you to our audience, and there will be many, many people watching this as a recording, and I hope you get that. You'll have the email for Akshay in the presentation. Do please send any questions through to him. Thanks so much, Akshay. Thank you for
Thank
participating
you,
again.
Alex. It was so lovely. I hope you enjoyed the session. Yeah.
Really interesting. And for those attending, do please leave the room. You have a 10-minute break now, not 15, but 10-minute break. And then you can join your second breakout session. Akshay, thank you. Wishing you a really nice afternoon and evening. Take care.
Thank you so much. Take
Bye bye
care.
all.